Hello and welcome to the special edition of ET Edge Insights. I have a very special guest with me here today. Before I introduce her, we're going to be talking about an important aspect of India, which is around the GCCs, the Global Capability Centers. Now, in the India context, there is a lot of growth happening there because of the demographic, the skilled workforce that's available, the infrastructure that's available. But a very important point to note is who are the people leading GCCs and other technology companies? They are unfortunately mostly men. Now, in that context, I'm in conversation here with a vibrant leader. I have with me Ms. Sirisha Voruganti. She is the MD and CEO of Lloyds Technology Center. And as you know, Lloyds Technology Center is actually a wholly owned subsidiary of the world-renowned Lloyds Bank from the UK. And we're going to be talking, Sirisha, about innovation, because that's obviously really important. It's what GCCs also bring to the table, and definitely want to hear your point of view being the head of such an important organization, especially how I set the context that there aren't many women leaders in tech. So firstly, thank you so much for talking to us. Let's first start with your views. I'd like to get your views on innovation leading strategy for growth, because these are very buzzwords, innovation, strategy. It's great to hear, but can you put it into real life context for us?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll just, probably step back a little and talk about innovation and why innovation. And I think all of us have seen it in our own lifetimes, right? Whether we moved from, say, letter writing to, now you see a lot of messaging and Snapchat and whatever. So all of that to me is innovation. Fire was innovation, and it's really about seeing those dots that a common man doesn't see. And to me, that is innovation, right? And it doesn't always have to be some, an Einstein-like idea that somebody comes with. I think in areas that we're working on, it's primarily looking at how can we push a product out there to market quicker, so it's really faster, quicker, cheaper, better. Those to me are the 4 watchwords. And all innovation is primarily looking at how can we do each one of these things better. And how does this drive strategy for a company? Companies like ours and many others, the larger ones, do spend a lot of money on what we call run the business, right? Really keeping the lights on. But that alone is not going to be able to help us in the long run. I mean, there are, if I look at banks themselves, right, there are lots of these newer fintechs that are coming us and constantly challenging us. There are new banks that are coming and constantly challenging us, because they do a lot of things quicker. They appeal to the younger crowd where they don't have to go to the bank, they don't have to do a check, they don't have to wait in queues. So it's really about all of that. And how do we counter much of that, right? We're going to spend a lot of the money that we have into running the business. So it's really about how do we increase productivity? How do we push code faster to production? How do we actually get that out into customers' hands much quicker? How do we, how are we kind of really available across all the channels, whether it is mobile, whether it is, on the online channels or whatever they are. So it's really important, I think, for us to constantly reinvent ourselves and reduce our spend on run the engine and ensure that we're able to push a lot of that into what we call new age technology that we'd like to invest. Right? And get away from legacy systems, want to move a lot of stuff to the cloud where, we're going to reduce our own storage costs and things like that. So it's really about how we're saving the dollar to reinvest the dollar in something else so that we make it really, really attractive. And constantly, when I say reinvent ourselves, it could be even those little widgets that need to be available. Are we able to upsell, cross-sell to our existing customers? Are we able to bring in newer customers? How does, a banking app appeal to, say, a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old? How do we increase saving habit in them? How can we gamify some of these things? How can we really make a lot of things interesting? I think that's constantly top of mind. And the other part of the question in terms of how does that lead to the strategy of growth for any company? So it's really about saving the dollar and reinvesting the dollar on something new that we can do so that you're constantly looking at newer work streams and newer revenue streams that are coming into the company. So I think it's really a win-win for all of us, where we constantly think about what new, what next, And I think that's the mindset that we'd like every engineer to really have.
But what I really liked about in your answer was this mention that you said, about how these are even the small, so to say, small things, or just maybe a widget, or how it can lead to something else. Because truly, my understanding, and please, I would love to hear your take also, is that innovation doesn't need to be this one big bang thing. It can be just these small incremental innovations. Just one, so to say, tiny step forward could end up being a large step ahead.
Absolutely. It's really about, process innovation. It could be, as I said, it doesn't have to be a big bang, the next Einsteinian idea that we have. But it could be these little things about how are we doing, if we have 40 processes in something, that we're developing today as we develop and push code to production. Can we bring that down to 10, and does that still work? Or, a lot of those systems, right? We have a lot of legacy systems. How does that work? Do we need to split that into, say, 20 microservices, or do you need to look at that as 10 microservices? How are these microservices interacting with each other? Do you bring in, and constantly be aware of that in terms of, is this a better way of design, or is something else a better way of design? The one thing I keep telling people is you need to look at architecting right. First time right architecture, to me, it never always works that way, but it's important to be able to architect your systems right. And the moment you spend a lot of time and energy doing that, I think the rest of the things do fall in place. So to me, architecture is really the most important for all of us to look at.
Something like, maybe I think they say it was Abraham Lincoln who was told that if you give me an axe to cut and an hour to cut a tree, I will spend 55 minutes sharpening the axe and then cutting it. Something like that.
Absolutely. That's so important.
Sirisha, but one thing is really important is inculcating that into the culture, into the DNA of the company. So while it might be with you and maybe the people, your close circle, the people that you're daily interacting with, but it has to, filter down to the last man, the last woman working in the company. How do you achieve that? And more importantly, how do you sustain that?
Yeah, so a couple of things, right? I can tell you a few things that we're doing from an organization standpoint. We do a no meeting Friday morning, for instance, right? So nobody is into meetings. That's your me time. You can actually spend that on either upskilling yourself, cross-skilling yourself, whatever. Or you can, want to develop something, you can just sit at your desk and, do that. We've created sandbox environments which are outside the firewall. They can go and, work on something new that could be interesting and not necessarily anything to do with your work, right? And then we'll figure out how and what needs to be done. So that's one thing that we've started doing in India. The second is we have these, global events where there are hackathons and things like that we run as well. So which could be, somebody has this amazing idea about the next generation banking or how that could look like. Maybe little applications that they actually develop to that effect. So I think we encourage a lot of that spirit of, relooking, reasoning, and then coming and challenging maybe existing systems that are there prevalent in markets. So I think all of that is what really encourages. We also have things like lightning talks. We have invited speakers that we bring in from various and not necessarily allied industries, right? There's a lot that's probably happening in retail. That could be very interesting, to banks as well, because it's a connected world today, or something that's happening in the auto industry and so on, right? So we try to bring in some of those guys to come and talk to us about how they've challenged their processes, their systems, how they're reinventing themselves. And I think it's very interesting for companies like ourselves. For instance, retail does a lot on analytics, right?
Yeah.
A lot on personalization. And it's so important, for them to push up their sales. Now, banks too are not very, very different today with all these, mobile banking and all the new age apps that are coming in. It's very, very important for us to constantly be out there with customers and get away from, somebody having to fill a form and somebody having to do, 20 other things, right? Because even if there are points or whatever on cards, everybody likes that to be real time, and everything has to be immediate. So we need to figure out a lot of areas that like that. And what we're doing by bringing in these folks into the organization to talk to us is to really understand where they're moving. And there are some interesting ideas that they can seed in people. So that's something that we're constantly encouraging, our teams to kind of look and do. And we've also introduced some things like certifications. People can, if they're not experienced, so they, if you're a GCP house and they're experienced on some other cloud environment, we kind of ensure that, it's interesting. They kind of, we provide the necessary, we're helping them through this process of certifications and so on and so forth. And how does that push innovation? I mean, they develop some applications on GCP that could again be interesting for the bank. So, yeah.
That's really insightful because, it's so true. As a consumer, they're not just, you're not competing just with any other bank. You're competing with everything else that the person does. So, for example, again, I know Netflix has said this, that they're not just competing with other OTT, they're competing with everything else that people do, even sleep, because they want to. So and that's the kind of expectation people would have from any service, that like you said, what retail is offering, they might expect that subconsciously from the bank. So it's great that
Yeah, absolutely. So for instance, you go by in a store and you want to walk out of the store and you want a very non-intrusive payment mechanism, right? Where you don't have to take out your card, you don't have to swipe it, but automatically there is a billing that happens potentially as you're walking out of the store. I don't know if we'll get there at some point, but those are the sort of interesting things that people want to do, because it's a matter of time, and not all of us have that sort of luxury of time that we had in the past, where you go and do a lot of shopping and then that whole experience, because I think everybody at home is crunched for time. So can we help you with bringing in some of these processes? Now, a non-intrusive payment mechanism is not just about you walking out of the store, but it's also about facial recognition potentially and whatever else that needs to be done, so that we recognize you for you and are able to bill you right on your credit card. And if it goes wrong, it just goes wrong crazy, right? But in India, I think we've seen that, this whole Digi Yatra stuff. I mean, whoever knew whatever we were going to do in that form? Or if I look at FASTag, I mean, how much has that saved time, right? If you look at the number of man hours saved, it's huge. I mean, if you add up everything that's happening across the country. So I think these are constantly things that we're looking at in terms of how do you ease the experience for the customer? How do you make it non-intrusive for the customer? And how do you save those few seconds where somebody has to take out a card and swipe and so on? So
I think you hit the nail on the head, because what you're trying to say is how can we ease and improve the life?
And in India, we've seen that so much. I mean, if I look at our own journeys over the last 10 years, just think of how much has happened, right? Digital payments. I mean, where on the planet do you see as much of digital payments that are happening as they are in this country? In every touch point that we have, which is digital, as I said, we have that at the airport, we have that, at a toll booth, we have that everywhere. So, I mean, and why not banking? Because I think that's a huge touch point in our daily lives for each one.
Something we use all the time. But Sirisha, there's a lot of buzzwords, buzz phrases that work out that people talk about. One of them being fail fast. So this is where I come to you on failures, because let's be honest, where there's innovation, there will be failures. And most often there are many more failures than successes. How do you tackle failure to not let it demotivate the company, not let the progress stop? What's your take on?
So I should show this to you. We have a wall of success and failure, and we actually celebrate failure as well, and which I think is very, very important for companies. Like you rightly said, 1 in 1,000 or 1 in many more is probably a success. So if you're running with 1,000 ideas, 999 of them are bound to fail, and there'll probably be that one thing which makes a difference to the market and which could be successful. But I think it's really important to try it out, and it's fine to fail. The reason we say fail fast is that we're not investing too much money and time into an idea where you don't see light to the end of the tunnel, but move on to the next one. So it's really saying, don't stop innovating, but as you're building things out, fail fast, and then move to the next one where there could be little nuances and little changes that you may want to make. at the end of the day, and that could be successful. If I look at some point, this whole thing of blink and pay was very popular among youngsters. So, you just blink and then it's like the fingerprint and the payment happens, right? And then, that was introduced into market and it was not successful at all because there could be a lot of issues with, and a single error, I think, can ensure that the whole thing.
Errors are highlighted more than...
And it fails. So for things like that, it's important for you to recognize that maybe the market's not ready for blink and pay, and then you move to the next something, right? So it's really
how like that. Get those learnings from those failures to kind of learn from those learnings. How do you spread that within the organization? That okay, we failed, but this is what we've learned from it. So the way ahead, at least we want.
So, well, one, I think organizations and what we've tried to do or what we've done in organizations that I've been part of is celebrating failure. So first, I think that's really important to say, you're bound to fail. 1,000 ideas of yours are never going to be successful, but it's okay to fail. I think that fact and the fact that people know that the organization or people, in senior positions do have your back all the time, I think is important. And this message that you can always fail and there'll just be that one bright thing that can be successful. Everybody talks about a Bill Gates or an Elon Musk today. But they also must have had a zillion ideas that failed and there was this one spark that kind of took off, right? And I think constantly talking about those stories and constantly saying it's okay to fail is probably something that we'd love to give, people that are working here. And the fact that you need to keep trying.
Sirisha, last question to you. If you could maybe guide our viewers, your thoughts on innovation strategy, how can it be? Are there some kind of steps that can help people implement that in their organization?
Well, I mean, just a couple of messages that I'd like to give people is one, keep innovating, keep thinking out of the box. And as I said, innovation doesn't always have to be, the biggest and brightest idea. It could be little things that you do which save you on time. And you're constantly, I think you need to think about faster, quicker, cheaper, better all the time. And I think you can innovate in every one of those spaces. That is innovation. And the second thing is it's okay to fail, but keep encouraging people to think out of the box and to think new.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sirisha. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and hearing all the great stuff that you're implementing at the company. Thank you so much for being a part of ET Edge.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure being part of this conversation with you.